990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
A $6 billion con.
It didn't take long for it to spread like wildfire,
which destroyed lives and devastated communities.
Every little town across the nation, people have shares in this.
We lost everything.
And to date, no one has been brought to justice.
Somebody knows more than we know.
The $6 billion gold scam. From the BBC World Service and CBC, wherever you get your podcasts.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC list.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at 22 degrees with mostly sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon, I'm Matt Humphrey. Brandon has seen a rise in suspicious fires and arsons this year. The city says it's an epidemic. Yesterday, Brandon Police and the fire department created an arson task force. Fire Chief Terry Parlow says the new task force formalizes an already cooperative relationship.
As a result of an increase that we have seen in fires of suspicious nature, that we are ensuring that there is a quick response to these and a cooperative response between our two departments, and if needed, the Office of the Fire Commissioner as well. 3
or 4 fire and emergency services investigators will sit on the arson task force. They'll be joined by police and members of the Fire Commissioner's office. Parlow says the group will better handle and share information as quickly as possible when an arson happens. And you can hear more on this story coming up on CBC's Radio Noon. A 36-year-old man is being charged with second-degree murder in a fatal stabbing near a downtown elementary school. 49-year-old Ricky Mancheese died after being stabbed near Sister McNamara School on Tuesday in Winnipeg. He and his wife were on their way to meet their son. Police are now telling us they made an arrest the next day. Police still ask anyone who has information to contact investigators. In international news, Ukraine and its allies are rejecting a proposal from the Russian president to end the fighting. Vladimir Putin claims Russian troops will lay down their arms if Kyiv agrees to his terms. Julia Wong has your details.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says only 2 things need to be done for the war in Ukraine to come to an end. Ukrainian troops must withdraw from 4 regions forcibly claimed by Moscow, and Ukraine must renounce its intentions to join NATO. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says this offer from Putin cannot be trusted, and allies like the U.S. have slammed the proposal. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin.
Putin has illegally occupied sovereign Ukrainian territory. He is not in any position to dictate to Ukraine what they must do to bring about a peace.
The offer is notable because it comes on the eve of what's being billed as a peace summit. Representatives from about 90 countries will gather in Switzerland this weekend to explore ways to end the war. Countries such as Canada, the U.S., and Turkey will take part. Russia was not invited. Julia Wong, CBC News, London.
And at the NATO meeting in Brussels, Defense Minister Bill Blair is insisting the Trudeau government is taking enough steps to increase Canada's military spending.
Canada still has more work to do, and we are going to do that work. We've begun the important processes of acquiring the additional capabilities that we require and that we require to meet NATO's requirements of us. And so we are proceeding with those. I believe it brings us inevitably to over 2% of defense spending, but I've got some work to do in order to be able to articulate that both to my own country and to our allies.
Canada is under increasing pressure from many NATO countries to step up its defense spending. It remains under the minimum 2% of GDP, which is required under NATO membership. This week, NATO talks have now come to a close, with the alliance agreeing to step up its commitment to the Ukrainian war effort. And all this comes ahead of the NATO Leaders Summit next month in Washington. Pope Francis had an unusual audience today with some of the biggest comedians. As Megan Williams tells us, dozens of funny men and women gathered at the Vatican to meet the pontiff.
Well, the Pope didn't exactly kill at the Vatican this morning. He did crack a joke, asking the comedians present to pray for him with a smile, not against him. Stephen Colbert, Whoopi Goldberg, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Chris Rock, and Jimmy Fallon were among the 100 or so comics in the audience, listening as Francis told them to keep spreading serenity and smiles in a world, he said, where people are facing so many social and personal crises. Former late-night host Conan O'Brien said of his seconds shaking the Pope's hand,
Well, it was brief. He spoke. It's in Italian, so I'm not quite sure what was said. He might have just angrily chided me. I don't know.
Others present hammed it up, crowding around to catch his attention and possibly a prayer. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
And a new study says a worst-case scenario could see polar bears disappear in the southern part of Hudson Bay as early as the 2030s. Alex Crawford at the University of Manitoba is one of the researchers who co-authored the report. He says the effect of warming temperatures on sea ice plays a role in the survival of polar bears.
Sea ice needs to be present, but it also does need to be thick enough for not just an adult male polar bear to walk on it, but also for them to be able to drag up a seal. And in addition to that, you do need to have the sea ice present for those seals, which are the main food source for the polar bears in Hudson Bay.
Crawford says in order for that worst-case scenario to happen, we'd have to continue emitting greenhouse gases at an increasing rate. He says the rate plateaued during the pandemic, but it's been steadily rising for the past several decades. Looking at the forecast, a high of 26 today, a warm day, and mainly sunny in Winnipeg. And Brandon, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 24 degrees. Dauphin, you're seeing a few clouds, looking for a high of 24 as well. In Flin Flon, a chance of showers and sunny, a high of 20 degrees. Thompson, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 21. And in Churchill, with the polar bears, a high of 20 today, with a mix of sun and cloud. Right now, you're listening to CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM.
Hello, Manitoba. Thank you for joining us today for Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Janet Stewart. When do you leave a tip? Have you ever felt pressured into tipping? That is the topic of today's call-in conversation after the 12:30 news and weather. Canada's longest-running country music festival is just 2 weeks away, and it needs support. Dauphin Country Fest is dealing with some big changes in the music business and in fan behavior. What that means for the future of the festival coming up. But first today, as you heard in the news, Brandon is reigniting its arson task force. We talked to the Chief of Emergency Services for Brandon Fire about the rising number of deliberately set fires in the Wheat City. Next. Brandon firefighters say they are seeing more and more suspicious fires. Now, the Brandon Police Service has reassembled an arson task force with the help of the Office of the Fire Commissioner and Emergency Services for Brandon Fire. Terry Parlow is the Chief of Emergency Services for Brandon Fire. I spoke with him this morning about the difference this task force could make.
We have seen an increase in suspicious fires in City of Brandon. So what the team is going to do in this arson task force, what it's going to do is enable us to have people dedicated to these situations and quickly and join our forces to coordinate our efforts.
How much has arson increased?
So we have had, obviously, some recent arsons that have been identified as arsons. We recently had a large store in Brandon identified, and also a residence recently in the last few weeks. But we have seen an increase in suspicious fires, and although some of those are still under investigation, they are deemed suspicious. So we are just identifying that we have seen an increase in fires, and more importantly, suspicious fires. A lot of these fires are occurring when people are in the buildings, in the homes, and it's very important that we basically find these individuals in the event of arsons and stop them from doing exactly what they're doing. And obviously the criminal intent, it's a crime, and Brandon Police Service is actually, like I said, working with us in the investigation process to bring these people and take them off the streets in the event of the crimes.
It's clear if someone's setting a fire in a home where there are people living where the danger is, but even a nuisance fire like a garbage bin or something like that, how quickly can that get out of control and spread?
A lot of the dumpster fires are associated in our downtown. They're against buildings. We have had several that have been against buildings, and which has then caught the walls on fire. And we've been very fortunate to actually quickly respond to those fires and put them out quickly. But just the fact that we've been able to get there quickly and put them out is not the only reason. The most important reason is they're occurring, and we don't want to actually have a situation in which we're all looking at each other going, you know what, we should have done something. So this is reacting to a situation in which we're seeing in the community of suspicious fires, and we are going to work our hardest in order to make sure that these individuals are no longer doing these.
Now, there used to be an arson task force, correct? It was sort of a joint thing between Brandon and Winnipeg. Somehow you were working together. Whatever happened to that task force?
So what had happened was Winnipeg had their own arson task force, and Brandon created our own, working directly with the Office of the Fire Commissioner. Brandon has now a large contingent of investigators on our department, so that is why we're going to work completely with Brandon Police Service, and if needed, we will ask the Office of the Fire Commissioner for assistance or request additional resources if we need them. At this time, they're just a resource. So years ago, we were seeing an increase, so we addressed that, and a lot of them were dumpsters, a lot of them were smaller nature fires, so we wanted to stay on top of it and address them as quickly as possible.
That was years ago. Was that task force ever officially disbanded, or did the threat of arson just decrease so much that it became inactive?
Yes, it basically became inactive just due to the fact that we weren't seeing the high number of suspicious fires. So we didn't believe at that time it was to continue. We're just seeing such an increase in these suspicious fires that we really want to join our two departments, and with the cooperation of the Office of the Fire Commissioner, work towards making sure that these don't happen, or if they do happen, it's very seldom.
Why do you think you're seeing this increase?
Well, there's probably numerous reasons why, but really to know what one individual or individuals are thinking when they're starting these is not known for me, but obviously some people get joy out of it. Some people think it's retaliation. Some people think it's a criminal intent. So there's various reasons as to why. Some of them can also be youth thinking that they are thrill-seeking and starting dumpsters and such. So we are also going to be, in the next week, we're going to start talking about our Fire Setter program a little bit more. So parents, when they're seeing their children playing with matches or lighters, they know that there's an avenue that they can bring their children into our department, and we can advise the kids and the adults as the importance of not playing with matches and lighters. That's another aspect of this that will be coming out next week. We're in the schools all the time talking about the importance of not playing with matches and home fire safety and making sure that you're not starting the fire. So that is that goes on all year long in the school division and in the schools. We have a public educator that visits the schools. This is more identifying parents when we're talking about this program that maybe they're seeing something at home or something that they're actually needing a firefighter or a public educator from our department to just talk directly with that one child. That's also very important because there are kids that believe that it's fun and don't realize the importance of not doing that. We're going to make sure that the parents and the kids in the schools remember that we do have this program. So if you are seeing these, it's basically providing them that knowledge that we do have these programs. So if they are seeing these things occur, then it is important to contact us, and we'll work with the parents and the kids to ensure the children know the importance of not playing with lighters and starting fires.
Chief Terry Parlow, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Janet. You take care.
You too. Terry Parlow is Chief of Emergency Services for Brandon Fire. Now, Winnipeg firefighters spent time in a school yesterday, but they weren't there to teach the kids. They were the special guests of students at Meadows West School. Grade 5 students in the Inkster Gardens neighborhood in Winnipeg have spent months working on this, reflecting on what firefighters do to keep the rest of us safe. CBC's Emily Brass was at yesterday's special event, and she filed this report.
They were treated like rock stars. Grade 5 students at Meadows West School lined up for first responders' autographs. The kids spent months writing essays, painting rocks, creating playlists, even making dioramas of fire stations. All of it is dedicated to Winnipeg first responders. 11-year-old Michaela Obanea wrote a poem to thank them for their bravery. Tiago Benavides made one of dozens of paintings to be sent to fire and paramedic stations across the city. The 10-year-old hopes...
I'm sorry about that. We're having some technical difficulties with that report. There's Emily Brass talking about a special event held yesterday at Meadows West Elementary School in Winnipeg, where firefighters met with the children who've been working to thank them for all the work they do to keep the rest of us safe.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
It is 12:15. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Janet Stewart. When do you leave a tip? And do you ever feel pressured into tipping? That is the topic of today's call-in conversation after the 12:30 news and weather. We'd love to have you join that conversation. We've got a special notice out today for people who have boats and might like to head up to the Lockport Dam, the one at St. Andrews. Well, that dam has been partially removed because of all the rain we've had lately. The water level was just too high. Now, because they've removed 4 spans of the dam, it's too low for many boats to get through that St. Andrews Lock and Dam. So do be careful if you're planning to boat there. If you need a lot of water to get through, you may not be able to. I called the Lock and Dam right before the show, and they told me they don't know how long this will need to be out. Coming up, Canada's longest-running country music festival, just 2 weeks away, needs some support. We're going to talk to the president of the board of Dauphin Country Fest to find out what he means by that, why the future of the festival might be in jeopardy. But first, a quick look at your weekend forecast. Sunshine today, 26 degrees for Winnipeg, a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow, getting up to 28 degrees. And that means a risk of a severe thunderstorm late in the afternoon. Sunday looks like it'll be mainly cloudy with the chance of a scattered morning shower, and 25 degrees. It is something Manitobans should be proud of, the longest-running country music festival in all of Canada. It happens right here in Manitoba, in a community with a population of roughly 8,000 people. But that festival, Canada's longest-running country music festival, is facing challenging times. Dwayne McMaster is president of the board of directors for Dauphin Country Fest. When I spoke with him earlier this week, I began by asking how big a deal it is for the festival to still be around 35 years after it started.
Personally, I think it's huge. We started this festival. The first year was 1990. It was started by a few local business people who had this idea to put on a festival. The next year, it was incorporated and became a not-for-profit corporation. And the fact that we've been managing it for 35 years, this small community in rural Manitoba has managed to put on this festival year after year and draw such phenomenal talent out here. Like the names we've had on our stage just blow me away some days. And, and we continue to do it, and I'm really proud of the fact that we do it and that we're a not-for-profit, that this is, nobody's getting rich off of this. This money's going back to our community and drawing. It's a huge economic driver for our community every summer as well. So,
how many paid staff members does Country Fest have?
we only have actually full-time year-round. We only have 3 paid staff members. We do have some seasonal site crew that come on for the summer to get the site ready and mow the lawns and put up all the fencing and stuff like that. But yeah, just our admin staff, our office staff is just 3 employees. So
that's a pretty big amount of work, I would imagine. What does it take to put this festival on in terms of volunteers and work hours?
We have so many volunteers in our community and groups that come out and help to run the festival. They say the number I was told at one point was that if nobody ever worked a second shift on the festival, we would need 2,000 volunteers to cover off that weekend.
And how big a lift would that be for a town of Dauphin's size?
Well, it's huge, really. Like I said, at this point, if 2,000 people came out there, that's a quarter of our population. We only have 8,500 people in town, right? So the idea that a quarter of the population is required, and the other thing is that we basically, there's some years where we've had 1.5 times the population of Dauphin up at our festival site. We've a sellout here is 14 or 12 or 14,000 people, and in a town of 8,500 people, that's amazing.
35 and still alive. That's that's the nickname you've given this festival.
Yeah, that was an interesting tagline that came up there early in the planning for this year, and we just thought it was sort of a little tongue-in-cheek. It was funny, right? But it has been, there's been struggles over the years, and it says, we're still trying to pivot and recover from the 2 years we couldn't have the festival for COVID, and people's attitude seems to have changed over during the pandemic there, and some people are still not comfortable coming back out and being out in the crowds, and people don't seem to behave the same as they did before. So
how do you mean, besides just not coming out?
Actually, one of the big things we've noticed is people don't like buying tickets in advance anymore, because they got bit too many times with buying tickets for something and having it canceled because of pandemic shutdowns and closures and stuff like that. And one of the realities of festival life, and every festival in Canada has to do this, is that we have to sell tickets to get the festival on, because for one thing, I said we have to pay our artists 50% of their fees in advance to show up. And so we have to sell tickets in advance in order to come up with that, because no festival starts out the year planning with $1 million in the bank to run the thing on and to pay those deposits, right? Like the 50% deposit. One of the other big challenges we've had over the last 5 or 10 years is the fact that the cost of the entertainment has skyrocketed. What we have to pay for the entertainment is huge now compared to what it was even 10 years ago. We need people to buy those tickets in advance instead of waiting till the weekend of the festival to show up at the gates and buy them. Going forward right now, we are at a critical point because, things haven't recovered from COVID. We haven't got back to where we were before. We've been trying to revamp the festival. So we've been making some changes. We've been lowering our capacity, selling less tickets. People, and even last year with the crowd there, we had a good crowd there last year, but people felt it was more comfortable last year because it wasn't the huge crowds we had 10 years ago. And people, I think a lot of people got used to having a little space during the pandemic, and they're, they don't like giving that up so much anymore. But yeah, so as we're just, like I said, as I mentioned before, it says the cost of entertainment has skyrocketed. Whereas other factors we're fighting with now is, just inflation. People have less disposable income. There's a lot of competition for your entertainment dollar right now too. I said the Canada Life Centre in Winnipeg brings in a huge amount of big acts and shows and stuff like that. And used to be 20 years ago, those acts didn't come to Winnipeg because they had too small of an arena. But they would come to Country Fest because we could actually get 12,000 people in Country Fest, and there was only 7,000 seats in the old Jets Arena. So we're facing a lot more competition in that way too.
So what do you need from the community to make sure that Country Fest will be around for year 36?
Well, at the end of the day, all of these festivals live or die on ticket sales, right? We need people to come out and enjoy our festival. We have what I think is a fantastic product out here. We have an incredible venue. The Country Fest site is a natural amphitheater built on the side of a hill right on the edge of Riding Mountain Park. I have been to a few other festival sites in Canada, and I've never found one that is a better site to watch a show. There is literally not a bad seat in the house to watch that show from. And we have a great lineup. This year we went throwback lineup for the homecoming there. So the homecoming theme there. So we've got all 90s and 2000 country, Clint Black and Alabama and Jody Messina, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. We've got some great Canadian artists there too. Jason McCoy is there and hosting, and Michelle Wright, Doc Walker, Carolyn Dawn Johnson. Like I said, there's a great lineup there that people want to see, and there's value, right? It's a 3-day event, and I think one of our board members figured out this year this is it works out to like $7 a band for the weekend.
So anyone who's thinking it's expensive, $7 a band.
Right, they'll pay $200 to go to a show in Winnipeg.
They'll pay $200 to go to a show in Winnipeg, but at Dauphin Fest, it's $7 a band. That was Dwayne McMaster, president of the board of directors for Dauphin Country Fest, speaking with me earlier this week. The 35th year of Country Fest opens 2 weeks from today on June 28th and runs until June 30th. Now, let's hear some music from one of this year's headliners. Clint Black with his 1989 hit, Killin' Me. He's one of the headliners for the 35th annual Dauphin Country Fest, which opens 2 weeks from today. Other headliners include Jody Messina, I know she's there. Alabama's coming. A lot of big stars from the 80s and 90s. Nitty Gritty Dirt Band will be there, and they were there at the very first Country Fest. Find out more at the Dauphin Country Fest website.
Sing and sway to R&B on Marvin's Room. Move and groove to the rhythm of Saturday Night Jazz. Crest with the best next wave of Indigenous music on Reclaimed. Savor the flavor of the Francophone world on C'est Formidable. and treasure the arias and encores on Tempo weekends. Saturday night means music on CBC Radio 1 and on the CBC Listen app.
It is 12:29 on a sunny Friday in Winnipeg. I'm Janet Stewart. Thank you for listening to Radio Noon. On Monday, if you were listening to Radio Noon, you may remember we introduced you to 17-year-old Haley Peters. She's from Kleefeld, a student at Steinbach Regional Secondary School. We spoke to her because she was a finalist in a national CBC Books contest called First Page Student Writing Challenge. Well, guess what? She won. She won this national contest in the grade 10 to 12 category. Congratulations, Haley Peters. Well on her way to her dream of becoming a novelist or some sort of professional writer. Still ahead on Radio Noon, it is time for our call-in conversation. We want to know, when do you leave a tip? Do you ever feel pressured into tipping? The phone lines are opening now. The number to call to join the conversation is 204-780-0893. Now, it's time for your news.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at 23 degrees with mostly clear skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. A 36-year-old man has been charged with second-degree murder in a fatal stabbing near a downtown Winnipeg elementary school. 49-year-old Ricky Mancheese died after being stabbed near Sister McNamara School on Tuesday. He and his wife were on their way to meet their son. Police now tell us they made an arrest the next day. Police still ask anyone who has information to contact investigators or Crime Stoppers. A new study says in a worst-case scenario, polar bears could be wiped out in the southern part of Hudson Bay as early as the 2030s. Alex Crawford is an assistant professor in the Department of Environment and Geography at the University of Manitoba and one of the co-authors of this report. Crawford says the effect of warming temperatures on sea ice plays a role in where polar bears can survive.
So it's the loss of that habitat that makes it so that polar bears and the seals no longer have the environment that they're used to living in. And without the seals being present, the polar bears don't have that food source anymore.
Crawford says in order for that worst-case scenario to happen, we'd have to continue what we're doing and emitting greenhouse gases at an increasing rate. He says the rate plateaued during the COVID pandemic, but it's been steadily rising for the past several decades. And Brandon's police and fire department are teaming up to address a spike in suspicious fires. Manitoba's second largest city is creating an arson task force. Fire Chief Terry Parlow says the task force will strengthen the already cooperative relationship between the police and the fire department in the Wheat City.
We have always worked very closely with police, but what this does is now basically there's aspects of the investigation process and obviously the police process that will actually instantly happen. It's breaking down a lot of the barriers that may be present between the departments.
The arson task force includes 3 or 4 fire and emergency services investigators, along with members of the Brandon Police Service. And Parlow says the goal is to gather and share information as quickly as possible, especially if arson or any criminal charges are involved. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head on over to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app.
Thanks very much, Matt Humphrey.
Back soon.
Have a great day.
You too.
Riley Lachuk is here now, our CBC Manitoba weather specialist. What kind of day are you having, Riley Lachuk, before we get to the weather?
I had a gorgeous walk into work today.
There you go.
Very nice outside.
Very nice outside. Getting warm.
Yes, and if you like the heat, we're in for a couple of days of some really nice temperatures, Janet.
That is fantastic.
Fantastic.
It also, I've noticed, we have a colleague in our current affairs area who came in with mosquito bites all up her calves because she was out playing soccer last night in the city of Winnipeg.
Yeah, it's not the only person who said that there's been a lot of mosquitoes out there, which has been the case, and we've seen some very wet conditions. I want to skip ahead and talk about Father's Day for a second.
Okay.
Because Father's Day, of course, happening on Sunday. Here's what you can expect, sort of through the day on Saturday. Maybe a scattered shower first thing in the morning in Winnipeg, 19 degrees if you have any outdoor plans. 22 degrees by noon, and a few more sunny breaks by the time we reach sort of the afternoon hours, 25 in Winnipeg for a high on Sunday. Temperatures now, 23s in both Portage and Winnipeg, 21 in Brandon, Dauphin's at 20 right now, and Thompson at 18 degrees. And we're looking at a pretty seasonal day for most of us in Manitoba, and in some cases above seasonal, really for southern Manitoba in particular with the temperatures. Satellite and radar, mainly sunny skies right now, not a lot to see. Few stray scattered showers in the far northwest of the province, sort of Lynn Lake and north. But other than that, we're looking at a pretty sunny day today for us here in Manitoba. Things change a little bit as we get into Saturday, which I'll get into here. So we'll start Saturday under sun-cloud mix. Chance of some scattered showers really throughout the day. Not talking about anything worth canceling your plans over, but certainly could be in one of those sort of popcorn showers, as I call them, where it's sort of raining one moment and 5 minutes later you're back into the sunshine. So yeah, chance of that happening through the day, but it's once we get to the late afternoon into the evening that things do start to get interesting again, with the risk of some thunderstorms, the potential there for a severe thunderstorm through the early evening hours, really throughout southern Manitoba. The highest risk through the sort of Brandon, Dauphin, Riding Mountain National Park region, just looking at the ingredients that are in the atmosphere and sort of the energy that's there, we are expecting the potential, at least, for some severe weather through the western part of Manitoba as we get later into Saturday, sort of like the early evening hours or so. Today's forecast, 26 in Winnipeg, 25 in Brandon, Emerson looking at a high of 27 this afternoon, partly cloudy skies. Partly cloudy, 21 in Thompson, and a few showers in Lynn Lake and 20 degrees. Tomorrow, 28 in Winnipeg, 27 in Brandon, 28 in the Dauphin region. We're looking at more summer-like conditions as we head through the weekend. Monday, 21 degrees, a mix of sun and cloud. 16 for Tuesday. Good chance we can see some showers, otherwise mainly cloudy, and 22 on the way for Wednesday.
Riley Lachuk, thank you so much.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Riley Lachuk is our weather specialist here at CBC Manitoba. He'll be back during Up to Speed today, which airs here on CBC Radio 1 between 3 and 6 p.m. You can also catch him on our newscast, which airs at 6. But you can watch it whenever you like on CBC Manitoba's YouTube page. It is time for our call-in conversation. Join in. I know you likely have an opinion on this. How many times have you heard someone say, maybe even you've said it yourself, to ensure promptness? That's what the acronym TIP means. Now, I don't know if that's actually true, but I've heard that over and over and over the decades, usually when someone's grumbling about lousy service and why they have to leave a tip anyhow. In recent years, the variety of businesses now giving you an option to tip before you use your debit or credit card has increased. How do you feel about that? Do you ever feel pressured to tip? Join our call-in conversation, 204-780-0893. Again, that number, 204-780-0893. Corey Mintz is our special guest today. Thanks for joining me in the studio today, Corey.
Hello, Janet, and it's a pleasure to be physically in the studio with you.
It's lovely to have somebody physically in the room, too. We do so much by Zoom these days. Corey is a food reporter and author of the book, The Next Supper, The End of Restaurants as We Knew Them and What Comes After. So I'm going to get to you in just a moment to get more on your background,
Take
Corey.
your time.
We
Don't
have a
rush yourself.
caller who has been waiting for a while. Caller line 1, perhaps he's gone. I see the line has changed, so I'm just going to go back. Please hang on, George. We'll be right with you. What is your background, Corey? How did you get interested in studying the larger political and economic implications of restaurant culture?
Well, my very first day at the Toronto Star, I had come from the restaurant world. I'd been cooking for years. I went to cooking school, and I managed to get the job as restaurant critic at the Toronto Star. And the very first day, there was a story meeting that I was unprepared for. I didn't know I was supposed to pitch ideas. And I said, how about something about the fancier the restaurant, the less cooks are paid? And I kind of got a lot of head shaking. And, I don't think that's true. And young people have to pay dues. And either way, people sort of dismissed the idea. And I probably wasn't really ready to write that story that day in terms of it. Probably didn't have the writing, researching, journalistic experience. But 5 years later, I finally was ready to write that story. And once I did, it really just took a sharp turn in my career in focusing on all the systemic issues within our food system, specifically focusing on labor and hospitality.
My jaw dropped. I didn't know that. It's true that the fancier, the more expensive the restaurant, the less the people get paid?
We'll get someone in here to help with your job, but it's not true 100% of the time. And I can point to higher end restaurants run by people who genuinely care for people and have put in place systems to not exploit people. But the general history and culture of the industry is based on exploitation of labor.
Wow. So what does that mean to this conversation? When do you leave a tip? When do you think you shouldn't have to leave a tip? Should we fix the system? Do you ever feel pressured into tipping? I know I have. Join our call-in conversation, 204-780-0893. Gilles has been waiting to join the conversation. Hey, Gilles, thanks for waiting, and thank you for joining Radio Noon.
Very good.
How do you feel about tipping?
Actually, I'm in favor of it. As I was telling your screener there, I usually start around 50% where there's very good service, and I go up from there as it gets better. If the service is excellent, I don't mind tipping 20%. And then I'll go down from there from 15 if it's only fair. And I have at times not tipped at all if I have very bad service. So I don't feel pressured to tip.
Can you tell us a story of a time that you didn't tip? You don't have to name the restaurant or the person, but what did they do that was...
I won't name the restaurant. Well, it's no longer in business anyway. It's been gone for years. But there were two couples, and the women had ordered certain cocktails, and when they got them, they said it wasn't right. The waiter came back with the bartender, and they were arguing it was okay. They just had attitude, and it went like that throughout the whole meal. And so when I left 2 cents on the table.
I guess you were leaving your 2 cents worth.
Exactly. When I was walking out, he said, "You forgot this." I said, No. I said, "That's yours." He threw them at me. He was upset. And this was not a run-of-the-mill restaurant. This was a very fancy restaurant. Like I said, it's long gone. Maybe there's a reason for that.
Customer service might be a reason for that.
Was,
well, Joe, what about excellent service? Can you tell?
Service,
yeah. What does that look like for you? Is there a story there too?
It can be, well, not really. I mean, you go somewhere and, a lot of restaurants will give you excellent service. You go into various places, whether it's the high-end diners or even regular restaurants. If it's good, I'll give 20%. I mean, some people really go out of their way. And it's sad to hear, as Mr. Mintz was saying, which, by the way, I used to read his column when I was in Toronto, when I lived in Toronto. But which, by the way, it's true. There is a certain amount of exploitation of labor. Although some of the higher-end restaurants do pay and pay well.
Yeah. Are you someone who goes to restaurants quite a lot?
Quite a lot. I would say a fair amount, yes.
That's good. I think restaurants would thank you for that. Has it changed over the years as things have gotten pricier?
Well, I was sort of in the business many years ago. I used to be a co-owner of a hotel out in rural Manitoba. And we always strive to give the best possible service. And even though they don't usually tip the owners, we used to get tips anyways.
Oh, well, good for you. You obviously gave...
Yes, there have been many changes. And as far as the cooks being paid less, I wasn't aware of that in some restaurants. But I know there's one particular place which was formerly owned by a relative of mine. They always paid the cooks more than the staff because the staff didn't take more tips than the cooks, although there was a sharing of tips between the waiter, the cook, the bartender, and so on.
Gilles, thank you for calling.
Okay, very
That's
welcome.
just lovely to have you on Radio Noon. Corey Mintz, you've got a fan there, someone who read your columns. How common is it for restaurants to share tips around with everyone?
The sharing is common. What is completely ununified is how they're shared. Every restaurant, it's like that Dostoevsky thing about every happy family is happy in the same way, but every unhappy family is unhappy in their own way. Every restaurant is its own fiefdom that divides tips in its own unique way. And typically, I was speaking with someone. I'm working on a piece about this right now. Typically, front of house, which is servers, bussers, hosts, bartenders, will retain about 85% of it, with about 15% being divided. That is far from homogenous. I know places where it's 70-30, 60-40, even equal shares for everyone, which is incredibly uncommon. But I can say over the last few years, as labor challenges, rising costs, in addition to raising costs of food, have just really forced restaurateurs and employees to kind of have, I think, a bit more open dialogue about this. There's been more competition for labor, more trying to figure out how do I actually keep my cooks, or how do I continue rewarding the people who stuck with me through the pandemic and shifting their job roles. There's been more conversation about how tips are divided, but it's there's really, not only is there no uniformity in how it's done, there's no transparency, and anyone who kind of presumes they know what happens to their tip after they leave it on the table, you're wrong. You don't, unless that restaurant posts something on their website about it, which practically nobody does.
I've heard stories of owners taking a percentage or taking the tips and then doling out something.
It happens from time to time. Manitoba is kind of unique in Canada in that there are really no provincial laws in how tips are divided. In Ontario, for example, owners are not allowed to take any portion of tips. And I think managerial staff have to God, I'm seeing this live on the radio. I believe managerial staff have to spend a certain percentage of their time on their floor, not in administrative tasks. It is different in province to province and state to state, but ultimately that's the principle of you actually have to be working as part of the service staff to take a portion of them. And there's always going to be some operators who are a little crooked and are skimming off the top. And I always encourage employees at those kind of places, don't just quit, file a complaint.
Okay, Manitoba, we want to hear your stories. 204-780-0893. If you're outside Winnipeg, want a toll-free number, it's 1-800-268-5483. What experiences have you had in restaurants that was fantastic or was terrible and you didn't want to tip? What do you think about tipping culture? George has been patiently waiting to get
George
on the line.
Is back.
Hi. No, it was Gilles first.
Mm-hmm.
This is George.
George, the one we were waiting for.
George, hello.
Georgie Porgy here. How are you doing?
We are thrilled to have you on the air with us. What do you have to say about tipping?
Oh, it's sensational in regards to tipping. To receive a tip of good service is wonderful. And then there are times that you kind of say, well, I'll give you a tip. You did the hardest you could possibly do. But the thing is, for myself, I was well trained in regards to service, customer service in regards to hospitality business. Working for Via Rail, I got my French plate service, so I traveled to Canada. And then I worked in some fine dining restaurants, Hotel Fort Garry, the Factor's Table, serving the Premier and other celebrities there. And then in the restaurants, they're nice, but tipping, I'm a critic when it comes to the customer service aspect. How they place the plate in front of you, or if they're saying, here, pass this plate over to that person over there. So, I'm more than willing to tip. And I myself, with my friend Johnny, he's a little bit older than me, and he goes, well, if they knew my name, I would tip them. He's a senior.
If they knew my name. So if he was a regular and he went back.
Regular,
yeah.
And if they knew his name, he'd give him a tip.
George, can I ask you, if they put your cutlery down, they reset the place setting, and they put the knife with the blade facing outward instead of inward toward your plate, is that a deduction from the tip?
No, every restaurant has their certain way of putting down their knives. So if they're all uniformed, I go with the flow. And if the restaurant tables are all set up for presentation as you walk in and being inviting, then they're doing a good floor manager skill. Like, this table is not set properly, do it over. Because I myself had a trained staff too in regards to proper service.
It's tougher to get staff and to retain them, though, George, these days. We hear about this over and over
Oh,
again.
you treat them with kindness. You give them a compliment, and then you say, get back to work.
There you go. George's theory of management.
Take a note, restaurant owners.
I got a cute story for you. I was working at Vulcan Lake one year, right, at the resort there. And guess who walked in the building? And I didn't know she had a cottage there. Sylvia Kuzik.
There you go, my friend Sylvia. Know her
I met her
well.
on the lobby, and I was signing up the board for the luncheon and the dinner for that night, and I saw her, and I was just gobsmacked. I said, oh, that's Sylvia from the TV, right? So I says, hi, Sylvia. And she goes, hello. And I said, so what's the weather like for today? No word of a lie. She was like broadcasting live on TV in front of me.
Seriously? She gave you the forecast?
But she was broadcasting. The wind's coming in for this side, blah, blah, blah.
It probably it took her brain into work mode. And so the voice changed and it got bigger, like it does on TV. George, thanks so much. Have a great day. Katie's calling as well. Kate, I should say. Hi, Kate. Thank you for calling Radio Noon.
Hi there.
Hi.
I was just going to say, I've been a server and a bartender off and on for 20 or 30 years now. And I totally understand the other side of it in that tipping is totally arbitrary. You do it if someone goes out of their way for you. And quite often, and as for me too, we don't have a lot of money ever. And so eating out is an occasion. We can't always afford to tip. And you have to understand that people don't tip often because they just can't afford it. Eating out once in a very long time is special. It's an occasion for them. Maybe that's all they can do. And I've been on the other side a lot. And I understand that tipping is something you go out of your way for when someone goes and does something special for you or goes a little out of their way or they see that you're a little bit down or you're not having a good time or they need a little bit of special attention. And maybe that's appreciated, but maybe they really can't do it.
That's very understanding of you, Kate. There's a lot of folks who wouldn't, on your side of the bar, wouldn't perhaps think that way, wouldn't be as generous.
Well, here's the thing, though. When you go and get a job, you're going to get what you get paid for. Anything else is extra. It's a tip. And I've been on the other side quite a bit, and I haven't been able to afford to pay a tip. I haven't eaten out in a very long time, and so it's something special. Maybe I don't have anything extra. But if someone goes out of your way for you sometimes and you really appreciate it, it's nice to leave something. But you can't expect it because that doesn't come with the job.
One of the things that does, though, that we're talking about with Corey, we haven't really dug into yet, but Kate, you've got experience with this, 20, 30 years in an industry, and sometimes you're feeling like money is tight. Do we not pay people in the service industry enough? Is that, Corey Mintz, why does tipping exist?
Well, do we still have Kate with us?
We still, I believe, have Kate.
Well, Kate, I'm curious to ask you, would you rather be paid a living wage than have tips be part of your compensation?
I would much rather be paid more, but on the other hand, when I walk into a job, I find out how much I'm going to be paid, and I expect to be paid that much. Anything else is extra, and if I really don't want to be paid that much, I don't have to take the job. That's the thing.
But
I have turned down jobs because I just think it's way too little for what I'm going to have to go through. And trust me, I've been through some rough jobs and I know what I'm going to have to go through. So if I don't think it's worth it, I'm not going to take it because I know that I'm going to get paid that wage if I take that job. Tips are extra and I love it. And sometimes I resent it when someone's a real jerk that they didn't even leave a tip sort of thing.
Right.
But on the other hand, I wasn't promised anything extra walking into that job, so at least I know at the end of the day when I go home, I'm going to get my paycheck.
Right. And but if the paycheck was bigger, that wouldn't be a bad thing because then you could plan better. You'd know exactly what you can afford for rent, exactly how much you can put in savings, stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I've had bad things happen in my life where I've had to go through my savings, for medical expenses, etc.
Right, because benefits, are they something that often come with service jobs?
Sorry?
benefits. Have you ever had a job as a bartender that included medical benefits?
Unfortunately, no.
Would you like to see that in the future?
I would like to see that, but I had an awful lot of jobs where they give you just enough under hours so that you don't qualify. And unfortunately, that's life, though. I mean, when I walk in, I walk in with my eyes open to a job, and I know what I'm going to get paid, and I know what I'm going to get for benefits. But on the other hand, I have rent to pay, and it's very nice when people tip me, but I can't expect them to do that because I very rarely eat out myself. I know how tight money can be, and I can't always afford to. And I do feel sometimes that I am resented because I don't tip enough, or, I'm always expected to tip. And I don't really appreciate that because, there are reasons that you don't eat out or drink out often. And sometimes you just can't afford that sort of thing. And it shouldn't be so much onus on the customer. The customer walks in and he knows what he's paying for too. He knows the price on the menu and he knows what he can afford. And that's what he's paying for. If there's something extra done for him that he really appreciates, that's why he leaves a tip.
There is pressure though, and a lot of people feel it. Kate, that's why we're having this conversation. Sometimes now it's like, you go for your coffee and you're expected to tip every time when somebody just hands you a coffee. How do you feel? What do you think, Corey?
Well, Kate sounds like the opposite of, there was a story out of Toronto last week with a server confronting patrons who didn't tip, to ask, where's my tip? Because I think Kate's attitude is I don't want to say commendable because she deserves to be to earn a living wage, but it seems the opposite of what the usual expectation is, which is this is part of my income, and you owe this to me for coming in. I mean, you began this with the perfect my favorite myth about tipping, along with the idea that it's the only way to properly incentivize your front of house staff as a sales force, which is that it's an acronym for to ensure prompt service, because it's so perfect because it depends on misspelling the word ensure.
Yes, it does.
With an I instead of an E. And obviously it was not created as this acronym. It is the mechanism through which we artificially suppress menu prices to create the illusion of affordability. And, when I was in the sort of beginning stages of writing my last book, I sort of had a call with the editor and the publicist and everyone, and there was sort of what's the takeaway? And I said, ultimately, if everyone's going to be paid a realistic wage and fairly for their work, the cost of eating will go up, and that really leaves the expectation of dining out, something we routinely do as a middle class once or twice a week, to maybe a bit more of a luxury. And the response at the time was, Corey, that cannot be the message of the book. People love restaurants and they love eating out, and you want to tell them to eat out more, if not anything. But reality has caught up with that message anyways, because the cost of everything has increased over the past few years. And much as diners may complain about the menu prices they see increasing 10, 20, 30%, even those menu price increases haven't kept up with the increased costs of goods and labors that restaurateurs are facing. So their profit margin is slimming, and they're more dependent on than ever that 20%, which they absolutely expect, that they pretend is not part of the menu price, that $10 meal, it's a $12 meal. They absolutely need that and can't do without it. That's why it is what it's always been. It's part of the true cost of the meal that we keep hidden from the customer and the Canadian Revenue Agency, but that's another conversation.
Corey Mintz, thank you so much for joining us today. Kate, thank you for your call. Thank you, George and Sheila, everyone else who contributed today. We have so much more to talk about here, Corey. Will you come back?
Anytime.
We need to talk about where we go from here in the restaurant industry and what is ahead. Corey Mintz is a journalist who looks at the implications of our food and restaurant culture. He also is author of the book, The Next Supper, The End of Restaurants as We Knew Them and What Comes After. Hi, Faith Fundal.
Hello, Janet Stewart.
Faith just walked into the studio to tell us what's coming up on Up to Speed today.
Yes, a Winnipeg organization wants your help in cleaning up our neighborhoods. Take Pride Winnipeg joins us on the program to talk trash and what parts of our city need the most attention. Also, Brandon City councillors are decrying a gopher infestation in the city. One expert says there's nothing to worry about. They're not even gophers.
They're Richardson ground squirrels, I bet.
They are.
Sorry, I'm interrupting. I love Richardson ground squirrels, but I've never tripped over one of their holes. I've never had my dog or my horse badly injured.
I'm not sure I would want that either.
Right, so there is a thing. I love watching them at the zoo, though. If you ever go to the zoo here in Winnipeg, they're my favorite critter.
We'll have that conversation and correct some of those misconceptions about what they are. So stay tuned for those stories to come.
Faith Wendell, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Faith hosts Up to Speed, which starts at 3 p.m. here on CBC Radio 1. I want to thank you for joining us this week, for joining these conversations that we've been having. Thank you to Kevin Nipatebo for putting us on YouTube. Thanks to everybody who's watched on YouTube as well. Dylan Longhurst, thank you so much for your work as our studio technician. Our director and person who juggles the phone so beautifully is Wendy Parker. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone. We'll chat with you on Monday. Up next, it's CBC Podcast Showcase.